Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining my Q&A with my deep voice. What we're going to do this time is I am going to just answer a question, whatever question gets my attention. And I'm not going to be looking at the chat while I'm answering the question. But while I'm done answering the question, I will go to the bottom of the chat, like the most recent chats, and look for the next question that gets my attention. So this might encourage you not to bother typing while I'm speaking. And I'll try to give you a heads up on when I'm just about done. So try to type in your question then. So the first question that I noticed is what methods, who asked this question? Lotus? What methods should one use to integrate the Vargas? I'm having trouble understanding how to use subcharts with the Rashi. Well, that's what my whole new report is all about. The first module that I'll be releasing in the new report is all about the Vargas. I wonder if I should show it to you. God, no, I'm not going to show it to you yet. But let me just I'm not going to show it to you yet. But I'll give you a summary answer to the question. How do you use Vargas? First of all, don't bother using them yet. First of all, read your chart. You got a main chart, right? Why don't you read that? Then when the main chart shouldn't be leaving you like wondering, is this me or is this somebody else? You should be able to read the main chart clearly before you start to wonder about how you will use the Vargas. The reason for that, and it's not like trying to gatekeep or anything like that. The reason for that is that's how they're intended to be used. They're intended to be supplemental to the main thing. Like, let's say if you're dressing to go out for dinner, right? There's your dress and then there's your earrings. You make sure you get the right dress first, and then you put on the earrings. Similarly, the main chart is like the main dress, and the subcharts provide the details within the context of the main chart. So that's my first advice. That's not a technical way, right? That's a theoretical way how you should use them, not out of context of the main chart. So for the practical ways to use them, the first thing is you can get a better idea of what kind of dignity a planet actually has if you just tally up the dignity that it has in all the various subdivisions. So for example, let's say if you have Jupiter in Capricorn. So you'll be thinking that it's debilitated, which is the worst dignity. But what if it's in the Sagittarius Navamsha? In Capricorn, it's in the Sagittarius Navamsha, so it's not really that it's half debilitated, right? Because its Amsha is great. So that's one way of using the Vargas. You just look at how dignity in the Vargas affects the dignity of the planet before you go about your interpretation in the main chart. For example, if you've got Jupiter in Capricorn in the 10th house, then wait before you interpret Jupiter in the 10th house, wait until you look at the Vargas to see all the dignity that racks up and tallies up as a result of it being in those subdivisions, and then interpret Jupiter in the 10th house. Okay? The other thing is, so you see that technique. So the first thing I told you was not really a technique, but just a principle. Don't interpret the Vargas. First, get your chart right. The Vargas will add to the chart. They don't replace it or something like that. They're not other versions of your chart. They're adding to it. Like decorations on a Christmas tree, you need the tree first. All right? That was the first thing I suggested. The second thing I suggested is get your cumulative dignity from all the Vargas. The third thing I'll suggest is you can also interpret the Vargas as separate charts, which seems different than what I said as the first thing. but it's a separate chart for a particular context or a theme, right? So, for example, every Varga has a particular theme that it's about. So, for example, and you have to learn what they are. So, for example, Dashamsa is about Siddhi, what you're very good at, what you succeed at. So, say if you have some planet that's in a particularly good situation in the Dashamsa chart, that has a specific meaning. Like, it's just if you have Jupiter in the 9th house, let's say Jupiter in, I don't know, let's say you have Mercury in Virgo in the 5th house in the Dashamsa. It means that you're very successful as a result of your organizational intellect. That's how you become more successful, by leveraging your organizational intellect. Because the interpretation of Mercury in Virgo in the 5th house is great organizational intellect. It doesn't even necessarily mean that the other things about Mercury in the 5th house, like you're very expressive or you're very creative or something like that. It's just exactly pertaining only to that one particular theme of Siddhi, or what you could be more successful by doing. So you can assemble subcharts of the Vargas, and the technical details of how to do that probably don't even need to know, because you probably just get them spit out to you by software. And then you just interpret those, but just the rule for interpreting those subdivisions is to make sure that you stay specifically within the focus of that subdivision. Okay? So for example, a good example is like D3, the Treka, the 3rd division, the 30th Drakons. That, when you're reading that chart as a separate thing, it's telling you about how you deal with competitors and rivals, and how you fight, how well you fight, how poorly you fight. So you frame the interpretation of anything that's in that chart to only pertain to that, not to the rest of your life. Okay? So those are 3 advices so far. The 4th advice is very advanced but very, very useful, is that you make a biwheel of the position. You know what a biwheel is? Where you take 2 charts and you put them into the same picture. You take a biwheel where one of the charts is your natal chart and the other one is your divisional chart, and you look for conjunctions between the divisional with the natal points, and that's going to highlight to you very specific things. It's an advanced technique, and if you're able to use it, you'll probably know how to use it, so explaining it further probably isn't too useful right now. However, that is included in my report. Let me just see if it's easy to quickly put it on the screen so I can show you what such a thing looks like. If it turns out to be easy, then I'll show it to you, and if not, then you'll have to wait a couple more weeks to see it. What do we got here? See without my glasses. Keynote window, pages. Maybe pages will work. No, it's not pages. I'm just going to try for 3 more seconds to add this. I don't see it, so I'm not going to do it right now. But don't worry, in a couple of weeks, I'll start releasing videos on this topic, exploring what this report, the new report that I'm offering, is going to be giving you. And also, if you want to know about your subdivisions, you should be a little bit excited, because hopefully by the end of the year, I'll be releasing this new report that's about exactly that. All right, so in a couple of seconds, I'm going to look at the chat again. I'll go to the end and I'll find a question that attracts my attention. I'm sorry if it's not yours. It's not because I hate you, or it's not because I'm trying to ignore you. It's just because I didn't, that's not the way fate worked out. I didn't see your question. Melina, how do you interpret when 2 planets are exchanging their exaltation signs and their mutual aspect? Well, that would be fantastic. But it's not really, is it? So look what you asked if they're exchanging their exaltation signs, but the example you gave was if they're exchanging their debilitation sign. Sun in Libra is Okay, Sun is in Libra. That's debilitated. Saturn is in Aries. That's debilitated. That's also not an exchange. So be careful that you understand the techniques. An example of two planets exchanging their exaltation signs. Is there such a thing? No, I'm not so sure if there is. Does anybody know offhand? Venus is in Pisces and Jupiter would have to be in Libra. Taurus. I don't think such a thing is possible. However, two planets exchanging their debilitation signs. So for example, if Mars is in Cancer and the Moon is in Scorpio, then that's an example of two planets exchanging their debilitation signs. It's supposed to be good, and I've seen it to be so, in the sense that it does Neecha Bhanga, which means that it alleviates the debilitation of the planet. If a planet is in a place where it's debilitated, then it's feeling incapable of doing anything because it doesn't like the environment that it's in. But if it has some kind of mutual contact with the planet that created that environment, then it gets some assistance with utilizing that environment. That's the concept. So debilitated planets that are in exchanges, their debilitation is modified, which if the conditions in the rest of the chart are good and if there's opportunities in the rest of the chart, can mean that they actually turn out to be great. The other thing I want to say about the exchange is, at least according to the way Paladipika teaches about exchanges, it's not so much the signs that are as important as the houses. So if you have planets exchanging Kendras, Konas, the angles are the trines, those are fantastic exchanges. The other exchanges are less spectacular, less effective. And if they're exchanging with the Dushtanas, which is 6, 8, and 12, then it's not really so great. It's kind of negative exchange. Bear that in mind. I think that answers that question. So I will again see what the new thing is in the chat. See what kind of a new question there is. What is a double transit for marriage? I'm not sure. It sounds like it's something I said, but I don't remember saying it. Double transit for marriage. Ask the person that you heard it from. If you heard it from me, what would I probably mean? Maybe if a transit is positively affecting both of the people in the partnership. I don't know. Question, what does a Parivartan yoga between 6th and 7th house indicate? So it's Daridra, like you said. But what exactly does it mean? What do you think? It means it's combativeness with the spouse. Or it may not be the spouse if Venus is very good. If Mercury is the weaker of the two, Venus or Mercury, then it's the 7th house is combative towards partnerships, will be more affecting business partnerships. Can you explain what having a planet at 29 degrees actually symbolizes? Asked Holly. I don't think that it's correct to think that the 29th degree of anything really symbolizes anything. It's just the 29th degree. You know, it depends on what sign it is, and it depends on what else is near 29 degrees. I know there's Sabian symbols and things like that, I think, which talk about specific degrees meaning specific things, but that's not my cup of tea. Not that I hate it, but it's just not my cup of tea. It's not something that I looked at because it's not something that's classical, and that's where I've been spending my time. So rather than looking for hard-coded degrees, what's really more important is what are the degrees that are important in a particular chart. In your chart, 29 degrees might be completely unimportant because you might not have anything near there, especially not your ascendant or moon or your sun. But in another person's chart, they might have their moon, ascendant, and sun very close to 29 degrees. So 29 degrees means the world in that chart. Another thing is 29 degrees of what? Maybe you're 29 degrees of Leo, which means something because it's real close to Regulus, which is Yogatara Magga. Well, maybe 29 degrees of Cancer doesn't really have such a fixed star near it, etc., etc., etc. So I'm going to check again. Sign exchange between 7 and 8 for a female chart is supposed to be, as I told you, the 8th house is a Drick. It's one of the Dustanas. So it's not really favored for the Dustanas. But if you have other conditions in there that are favorable to feminine power, then your 7th and 8th house exchange can work positively towards that. Fernando asks, what is the reason behind the principle that people with Mars in Virgo are more likely to be seen to be overprudent, or that a person with a moon in Taurus is more emotional stable? It's just the principle is just the simplest principle in astrology. The signs are the places, and the planets are the people. That's how you envision the drama that's playing out in the sky when you look at a chart. The planets are the actors, and the signs are the props on the stage. So if you have a Virgo prop set up on stage, then you have certain props out there. Pens, papers, pencils, rulers, file cabinets, libraries, things of a Virgo-ish nature. How do you figure out what those props are? You learn about Virgo. What is it made out of? It's made out of Mercury, using the earth element, and a dual sign. So the actors that go onto that stage, if you have like Sylvester Stallone and a Mercury on a Virgo-ish stage, the drama's not really going to come off so well, unless it's a comedy. Right? Because Sylvester Stallone plays blockheaded fighters and action heroes or whatever. But if you have an Aries stage set up and you put Sylvester Stallone there, then that pops off. So if you put Mars in Aries, it's popping off. If you put even in Sagittarius or something where Mars can use the props well to its character, that interpretations, they take off. They go in a positive direction. But if you confuse things, you put actors of a certain archetype on stages with a different archetype, then the dignity goes down. They don't know what to do. They don't feel like they can play their role. It's a really good explanation. Moon in Taurus, why is it then therefore stubborn? It's not stubborn, it's a misconception of mostly modern Western popish astrology has that concept of the moon in Taurus being stubborn. The reason why it is a misconception is because stubborn is an inherently negative word. I don't mind inherently negative words. I just think they should be used at the correct time. And moon in Taurus is not the correct time to use an inherently negative word unless you're so wet behind the ears that you don't realize that the moon in Taurus is exalted. But the concept behind that misconception is Taurus is very enduring, because what kind of props do you have on stage if Taurus set the stage? You have earthy props. So you have things that are heavy. They don't move well. You have stones, right? Farm equipment, things like that. So what is the reason why Taurus creates exaltation for the moon is because it forces the moon to actually get patience and get focus and sit still and go deep. Where the moon likes to instead just change around and everything. When it gets in Taurus, it likes the female environment, but it gets some chance for improvement because of the heaviness of it. The heaviness of Taurus. So the heaviness of Taurus, when the moon is utilizing it, which indicates the mind and the opinions, it can come out. People can think it means heavy opinions. It does, strong opinions. The word stubborn is not correct. You might have a very stubborn person with the moon in Taurus, but it's more likely because they also have Saturn doing something. Or they have a lot of planets getting controlled by Saturn. Saturn is really the right planet to use the word stubborn with. Okay, I'm going to look at the chat again. I just came home, set up the camera, and did this. So I'm not sure how much endurance I have. We've been doing it for 18 minutes already. Oh, look, Paul has a nice, easy question. Excuse me for the indigestion. How did you get into astrology? That's a nice break. Believe that. There's such a poor. Can I make a request? So I grew up in a culture of hardcore punk. So the thing that we did well was we did everything ourselves. This was immediately before Nirvana. There were no magazines covering us. There were no record labels trying to promote us. No commercials were asking us to use our songs. But we did everything ourselves. It's very similar to astrology. Like, besides the stuff that's already very mainstream, nobody really cares about really hardcore astrology. It's completely off the radar. So therefore I noticed there's like very little media coverage. There's very little solid sense of even a scene. The reason why we had a scene is because we made it. So I think I'm too tired to make it because I'm busy doing my astrology. I'm doing all my research and I'm doing all my programming. But maybe you guys could do something. You don't have to be an astrologer to contribute to putting a spotlight onto astrology. Doing interviews with people, making little fanzines, magazines, making channels dedicated to having conversations between people for questions like this. I can't believe, how many years ago was this that I started doing astrology? It's 2007. What year is it now? 2024. And this isn't known thing. How did you get into astrology? It's kind of makes me realize wow, you guys don't know anything about me or the people that are anyone of those. Anyway, that's my suggestion. So to answer the question, for every action, there's like a long cause and effect. How do you get into astrology is almost as mysterious of a question of asking why the sky is blue. It's this long chain of cause and effect and karma. But we can talk about the immediate causes. The immediate cause was I got married after living in a Hare Krishna temple between the ages of 18 and 26. Dropping out of college. So the big question kind of is what are you going to do to make money and earn a living? So I was doing different things like programming and so forth that I was pretty uninspired by. So out of the blue, my wife just suggested Vedic astrology because when she was younger, she had a reading from a Vedic astrologer. She also lived in a temple. And that reading, she was just so profoundly affected by that reading. It was a very positive influence on her. So she had a very high opinion of the kind of role that a Vedic astrologer could play in somebody's life. And she just had an insight that I would be good at it. So she just suggested that I do it. And then I just picked up a book about it. And it was just immediately made more sense to me than even what the person in the book was saying. It was very quick and easy to figure it out. The main challenge that I had trying to learn it initially was I felt like the quality of the teaching about it was so bad. It was so disorganized and it was so unsystematic and it was so hearsay. That I had to comb through so much garbage and put everything I had to put everything in order myself to learn it. But because there must be a lot of exposure to it from previous lifetimes, I was able to do that. So we can all thank my wife. if you want to thank somebody for me being involved in astrology, the credit goes to my wife, at least as the instrumental cause. All right. Thank you for that interesting personal question. Hi, Prakriti. So let's see now. We're going to look down at the bottom of the chat. Days asked if I have any book recommendations. I can recommend you a URL where there's a lot of great books. As I actually just said, like, I wish I had good book recommendations. There's not a lot of good books. That was the problem that I encountered trying to learn it. But if you go to victakara.com/books, you can see the books that I produce. I would recommend those. There's several other books that are good. Ernst Willem, Graha Sutras, is good, even if only for the fact that it's actually from an authorized source and not just hearsay. Otherwise, no, it's not like there's a lot of really great authors. Of course, there's interesting stuff to read. But again, I don't really spend my time reading that because I just like to study Politipika. Yes, do new reports have information on retrograde planets? The new reports are not about retrogression. They're about the subdivisions, the amshas. They're extensive. So it's the way that my services will be offered henceforth from whenever I make the new change, which will probably be at the end of the year. It's not going to be like a bunch of different reports, but it'll just be modules that you can get in a report. And the first module that will be released is the one of the subdivisions. But perhaps I will do something on retrogression in the future. You also have to think about who you're talking to. Am I a guy that's big, made big deal about retrogression in the past? I always talk it down. So it's probably because I don't have a lot to say about it. And it's probably because mainly the thing that's going on with retrogression is mainly just strengthening of the Bala. But I might. So let's see. Hello, and thank you for, who's this? My glasses, I couldn't find them in time. Spill Logic. Hello, and thank you for all your work. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Good luck to you. Thank you, sir. Holly S. Do you ever plan on releasing your full version of Politipika in book form? I think Holly knows that I already released chapter 1 to 4, which is kind of the essentials of it. And yeah, I do plan to. It's not that compelling to release the books because I haven't seen that many people buying them. So if I see more people buying my books, then I'll release more. Otherwise, I'll wait until I have time to do it. So probably... The other thing was, after releasing the first part 1 of the Politipika, I realized there's other chapters that should have been in there. So I may just wait till the whole entire book is finished translating and then organize it into parts and put it out. Sandra says, I finished the first book from you, but I don't yet have a good order to read your books. Any order is fine. Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology first. Radically Deep Fundamentals of Astrology second. Then Nakshatras, probably Nakshatra Sutra, the heart of Vedic astrology. The authentic heart of Vedic astrology, third, and then 27 stars, 27 gods, fourth. And throw the fifth one and throw Politipika in there somewhere. Alrighty. Got 30 minutes under our belt. We'll try to go longer. What are the questions we got? How do you interpret Mars in the 6th house for the Scorpio ascendant? Let me find you my... So now I'm actually coding the part of the textual interpretations of the report. So I actually have somewhere Mars in the 6th house. Well, let's talk about the things that you need to know. I don't, however, have my glasses, so that's going to be a little rough. Yeah, here it is. Let's talk about the things that you would need to know to interpret Mars in the 6th house for a Scorpio ascendant. So first of all, you just need to be able to count to 6 and know the order of the zodiac. Those, which is sometimes is not so easy to remember. Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. That is, in fact, an interesting thing about the Scorpio ascendant. That the owner of the 1st is also the owner of the 6th. Very fitting from Mars. So you then understand that the reason for doing that is to understand that if Mars is in 6th house for Scorpio ascendant, it's in Aries. We talked about that's like Sylvester Stallone on an action set in an action movie. So it's probably going to go off well. The other thing that lets you know is the Lord of the 1st is in the 6th and the Lord of the 6th is in the 6th. So you also can also get information about this placement by considering what the interpretations of the 1st and the 6th and the 6th and the 6th is. So ultimately, as you get used to it, you do it all at once. Mars in Aries as the 6th Lord and the 1st Lord in the 6th house. And you just you realize like this is very positive. It's really positive for Mars to be in Aries in the 6th house. Then you just need to ask yourself the question. You understand why I'm saying it's positive, right? A, you have a fighting planet in a fighting house. So it makes it positive. B, you have a planet in its own house. C, you have a Lord in its own house, which is the same thing. And D, it's significant because it's the 1st Lord. So all you really need to know now is what does it mean? What does the 6th house read like if it's positive? Especially if it's Mars making it positive. So what you get, according to my under the hood in the code of what I would be putting out, you're going to get, what does that say? Yeah, you get something called ascension, solution, and freedom. Those are the 3 keywords. Ascension, solution, and freedom. So ascension means natural superiority or defeat resistance. So in other words, Mars in the 6th house in a positive situation, as it is with Aries, is very difficult to defeat. The person is ascendant. They tend to rise up. It tends to be impossible to hold them down or put them down. They tend to defeat their enemies. The other thing is solution. Solution means what? Especially if it's Mars, solution. So because 6th house represents problems. So if you're talking about a positive 6th house, you're talking about solutions. If you're talking about Mars, you're getting solutions on your own. So this person that has Mars in Aries in the 6th house is an independent problem solver. They solve problems on their own. They're not very dependent on assistance. They can fend for themselves. That's a good way of putting it. They have bold initiative. So because in their solution, they come up with a solution by themselves. They don't have to wait for a committee. They don't have to wait for an approval. They see a solution, they take action, they conquer it. So they have this kind of activity and this boldness and this non-hesitancy. Another thing is decisive commitment to the strategy. Again, it's really because it's the same reason. They don't have a bureaucracy. They don't have a committee. They don't have, to figure out what somebody else really means. They're solving the problems on their own. And they don't give up on the strategy. They're good strategists and they don't give up on the strategists. But they're independent strategists. They're not going to be solving problems well if they're forced into committee. Freedom. The third thing about a positive 6th house is freedom, because the negative 6th house is indebtedness, slavery. The freedom is unaffected by boundaries and borders. So, for example, they could they could easily relocate. Like they could be very comfortable going to another country. They could be very comfortable just going to the other side of the fence. Whatever it is. They don't have they don't have many boundaries or borders because they don't have a lot of fear. Individualistic and unique is also another aspect of freedom. So this is what it's like if Mars is in the 6th house with the Scorpio ascendant. Now, mind you, that is one part of your whole chart. That's what Mars in the 6th for Scorpio ascendant is contributing to the whole chart. Let's see what else is up there. What's that? Shakti. Shakti, yes. What about Scorpio ascendant? Well, that's kind of the same thing. Komodo. In a transit interpretation, the first lord is conjunct with the planet. How is the interpretation modified if Rahu is also conjoined both the first lord and that planet? So you got a planet in your chart. It's the first lord. And you got another planet transiting it by conjunction with Rahu. Anytime Rahu is transiting something, you're getting upset. But from that point, or it's getting exaggerated or exacerbated. So, for example, you may get like strong outputs of desire, all this strong urges, strong desires, or over certain placements, it could mean strong fears. It will exacerbate whatever it is transiting, make it suddenly a lot stronger than it usually is. And then if you're throwing another planet into the mix, you would need to know what that planet is. Okay. How do you combine sidereal nakshatra placements together with the zodiac? Why not? How could a sign like Leo Moon have a sidereal? Just nakshatra and pusha. I've answered this so many times. Why not? I mean, why are you treating the nakshatras like they are parts of the Rashi? They're not. The Navamsha is a part of the Rashi. Nakshatras are not amshas. They're divisions of the stars. And the Rashis are not. They're divisions of the day, the daylight over the course of a year. So how can you have Pusha be in Leo? Go ahead and look at the quality of the leaders that we have had. So, and then you can figure out why you have incompatible nakshatras transiting certain rashis in certain periods of history. Okay, I think I'm going to answer 3 more questions because I'm a little tired. I'm gonna count to 6, and then I'll look and see the first question that pops up after I count to 6. 1, but don't forget you guys have delay, so don't try to time it. Just go ahead and trust. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First question that pops up. How would you interpret sign exchange between the 10th and 12th house? You guys love sign exchanges. Like, as I said, the 12th house is not great. The 6th, 8th, and 12th house. So it's going to be draining on the 10th. That's your basic thing. I also don't recommend that you try to be an astrologer, really. I recommend that you consult astrologers. But I guess it's good to learn. Because it's so complicated. But I applaud you for increasing your astrological knowledge. But don't think that you're doing something wrong if it's still confusing even after I explain it, because it's confusing and you need to practice it for several lifetimes. So with the 10th and the 12th house exchange, you gave even an example of signs. Jupiter in 10th and Libra. Ooh. Venus in 12th in Sagittarius. Jupiter in 10th in Libra is very nice. And Venus in Sagittarius is also kind of nice. So what you're thinking of, it's like it's obscuring the career, and it's also causing the person to wander. So this person probably isn't like the kind of person that was in 4th grade and the teacher asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they were like, oh, I want to be a banker. And then they grew up and became a banker, and now they're still a banker. They're probably the exact opposite of that kind of person. Moreover, they're probably the kind of person that, grew up in one county and winds up in a different state, or grew up in one country and or grew up one religion and winds up a different one, or grew up conservative and winds up liberal, or vice versa, or something like that. There's a lot of changes going on in their behavior. There's a lot of growth and movement, and the career and the notoriety of the person becomes less mainstream and more kind of niche and obscure. But the combination of Jupiter and Mercury, you got to expect that the person has an intellectual slant to them. So they probably are going to be working in some more obscure intellectual fields. Okay? So now let's close our eyes and I'll count to 5. And we've got 2 more questions left. I'm going to count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. What's the point of having nearly all your inner planets in the 6th house? It's not the point. What's the point of it? It's just a fact, simple astronomical fact, that the inner planets are usually in the same place because that's why they're inner planets. They're always close to the sun. Astronomically speaking, the inner planets are always close to the sun when you look at them from the Earth. So it's not like it's weird that you have all your planets inner planets in one place. It's typically the case. The atypical case is to have the inner planets spread out. And in fact, if they're spread out, that's more noteworthy than if they're not. And it's positive in a note. It's noteworthy in a positive sense to spread the 3 inner planets out into different signs. So really, you're just going to be interpreting the 6th house a lot if you've got all 3 planets in the 6th. Huh. What was Krishna's most Sun in Aries moment? He had Sun in Leo. Whether he had anything in the 12th house, I don't believe so. Not very Aries fellow. So I'm going to answer one more question now. And I'm not going to count down. I'm just going to look at it right now and see the next question that pops up. I'm going to skip this question. More Bhagavatam. It's not a question. I'll respond to it though. I'm so stuck on chapter, whatever it is, 20. I'm just stuck for like a year trying to make it as concrete as I could make 16. So you're going to have to wait for me to get done with that. Sorry. So let's see now. So here's this good question from Melina. I appreciate this question. I've seen you say in one video you don't believe there's a thing like Neecha Bhanga, but in others, when you interpret charts, you mention it. So it's not like I don't believe that there's a Neecha Bhanga. I think that people are just like overly reliant on it. And I think that their methodology or technique for assessing Neecha Bhanga is off the wall. Like they have a list of like 18 different rules that could trigger Neecha Bhanga, which is just like you're always going to find a Neecha Bhanga if you need it to explain some reason why you're not being accurate with this interpretation. So I just think it's like smoke and mirrors or like weak. But it doesn't mean that Neecha Bhanga isn't really a thing. It just means that people are kind of exploiting it or using it wrongly. So, for example, today I mentioned if you got this Saturn, well, no, what was it? My example was Mars in Cancer and the Moon in Scorpio. That exchange is going to do Neecha Bhanga on both of their debilitations. It's not because I have a checklist of rules about Neecha Bhanga. It just makes sense. The reason for the Neecha or the debilitation is that the planet is uncomfortable with its props. It can't play its role with the set that's on the stage. But if you have the director, the lord of the set, the lord of the sign, directly in contact with the actor, then they can work it out better. So the planets that have exchange with their lord, their dignity improves. It's not like I would put Neecha Bhanga in a separate category or something. It's just a part of the principles of how you evaluate the dignity of the planets by how well they're connected with their lord, for example, or like if they're in Vargotama. You don't have to have a separate thing to call it Neecha Bhanga. The effect is Neecha Bhanga. It means the debilitation gets modified. Right, but you don't. It's just the principle is just good house exchange, or the principle is just contact with the lord of the sign. The principle is just Vargotama. You got Moon in Scorpio, and you got Moon in Scorpio in 6 of the subdivisions. I bet you your Moon in Scorpio is pretty good. It's not because debilitation isn't a good technique. It's because Vargotama is a very important technique. You understand? I hope you understand. Oh, auspicious. I'm not roasting. My simmer level is turned down. But yeah, I do roast. Roast is, it's just part of the Italian Capricorn experience. But roasted beans make good coffee. And roasting, you gotta roast your grains, get good halva. Okay, guys. Thanks, everybody. Glad I was able to do this, get back in time. I think I'll do, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I'm just a little tired, and if I came off grumpy, that's just who I am. But, I love you, and I'm just trying to give you the best information that I can. Thank you very much.